Good evening and welcome to this latest in a series of FCC Zoom talks. This discussion is about the crisis in Ukraine. We're going to be starting in just a minute with a couple of panelists. But before we get started, let me just tell you to please keep an eye on the FCC app or website, because we've got a couple of really good talks coming up next week, starting on March 15th. We have a talk with Eric Schwartzel, who is he covers the film industry for the Wall Street Journal, and the talk is going to be about his new book which is called Red Carpet: Hollywood, China, and the Battle for Cultural Supremacy. And it's going to be discussing the growing ideological rivalry between the U.S. and China when it comes to the issue of film, and a really interesting topic there. And we've got a couple of other interesting talks coming up next week on the 16th of March, which is International Freedom Day, dealing with the question of the problem of international slavery. We're partnering with CNN and correspondent, anchor, and FCC board member Christy Lou Stout, and she's going to be the host and moderator of that event. And then on March 18th, we're going to have the Godfather of Lan Kwai Fong, Mr. Alan Zeman, who's going to be talking with us. And then later on, we're going to have a couple of other interesting book talks. So please do keep an eye on what we've got coming up from fcchk.org, or please do use our app. And for today, our discussion is crisis in Ukraine. We've got two panelists here. We're going to start with Dr. Mher Sahakyan, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's the founder and director of the China-Eurasia Council for Political and Strategic Research in Armenia. He's going to be joining us now from Armenia. He is an AsiaGlobal Fellow with the AsiaGlobal Institute with the University of Hong Kong, although because of the pandemic, I think he's a non-resident fellow. Normally, the AsiaGlobal Institute Fellows are here with us in Hong Kong, but he's going to be joining us from Armenia. And he's also launched the annual International Conference on Eurasian Research on Modern China and Eurasia. And Dr. Sahakyan is also a lecturer at the Russian-Armenian University. He's co-author of China and Eurasia, Rethinking Cooperation and Contradictions in the Era of Changing World Order, which is published in 2021. He has a doctoral degree in international relations from Nanjing University. And then coming up pretty soon in our Zoom talk here, we're going to be joined by Karu Ung, who is a photojournalist. You might be familiar with his work because you may have seen his photography appearing with Kyoto News, NHK, Asahi, TBS. He's been interviewed many times here in Hong Kong. He's one of the few Hong Kong freelance journalists based now in Ukraine. He's in Kyiv now. He's going to be joining us in just a few minutes. And so without further ado, I'd like to start with Dr. Mher. First of all, how are you? You're in Armenia, is that correct?
I am fine, thank you. And thank you very much for this opportunity and the invitation. Hopefully in the summer, I will join you in Hong Kong.
We'd love to see you in Hong Kong. You should be here if you're one of the AsiaGlobal Fellows from HKU, Asia Global Institute. But, Dr. Mher, thank you for joining us. You're in touch with people in Russia. You're in touch with people in China. I'd love to know, just from what you've been hearing from your friends, colleagues there. First of all, what do people in Russia know about the conflict going on in Ukraine? What do people in Russia think about the conflict going on in Ukraine?
Well, thank you very much for a very interesting question. People are in Russia have three opinions. There are three segments. The first one is fully support this military operation in Ukraine because they do believe that this operation is for keeping Russian population in eastern Ukraine safe. So they do believe that with this operation, Russia is helping its people in Ukraine, and they are fully support Vladimir Putin. The second segment do believe that it was good to recognize independence of Lugansk and Donetsk, but they are not agree that Russians are going towards Kiev. And the first segment, there are a lot of people in Russia also which are against this war. They are thinking that this war must be stopped and diplomacy must prevail and the problem must be solved diplomatically.
Yeah, it's interesting, but interesting because we're, a foreign correspondents club here. Is the media, is the international media, is the independent media not kind of breaking through that narrative and giving Russians, average Russians, another view of what's really going on? Are they totally believing what's there, or are they able to see another reality?
Well, they are getting news. It is really tragedy for both sides, because these two nations, Ukrainians and Russians, are very, very connected with each other, with culture, with religious, with family issues. So they are getting news from each other, and they know what is happening there. And it is really tragedy. They are taking this news in Russia and Ukraine very sadly, because they were speaking about Russian-Ukrainian brotherhood and friendship. So they are killing each other now. This is tragedy for many families, because in one family, husband is Russian, wife is Ukrainian, and they have child together. So it is really very big tragedy. And now these families are also living from Russia. Now we have many Russians, such families which are coming to Armenia to find here place to live here. So it is very big issue, and it is they are getting this news. And I don't know one person in Ukraine, because I am also keeping contact with my Ukrainian friends. Most of them living there, some of them struggling, and it is really a big tragedy for both nations.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you, what do from your contacts there? I mean, you've lived there, you know people there. I mean, what do the average the Russian population, the people there, what do they think of President Putin, Vladimir Putin? Is he popular?
Yes, he still have popularity, and many people support him.
Ah, that's really interesting. And now also you went to university, you got your PhD, you know China very well as well. I'm kind of curious what you think about China's role in all of this, but more, and also when you talk to colleagues, friends back there in China, what do they think of China's role in this? Basically they signed this no limits friendship agreement with Russia and trying to basically be a neutral in this. What are you hearing?
We are living in a changing world order, and in this world order, I think we have two sides: Western side and the Eastern side, which is being created by Sino-Russian tandem. So, in many international issues, Russia and China are playing together, such as Iranian nuclear issue, such as the PRK nuclear issue, such as Syrian issue, and of course, Russia is not ally of China because they have not such agreement. But many experts and politicians like to say that it is more than alignment, because these two sides are helping each other in military, in political issues. So they are trying to change world order, and they are doing it. We can say that Ukrainian crisis and what is happening in Ukraine, it is proving once again that unipolar world order, US-centered world order is a history. And now we have, of course, it is also not right, I think, to speak about multipolar world order, because the US is much more stronger than China and Russia. But if these two non-Western powers are playing with each other, so they are making some balance with the US. In this situation, I do believe that analyzing China's sources as well, and speaking people from which are living there, working in diplomacy or in academia. So China is trying to play a neutral role and trying to speak about peace, trying to speak about mediation. But I think that they do not need that Russia lost this war. They need that Russia do not lose this war, and because they know and they do believe that if West collapses Putin's Russia, the next will be sees China. So for this reason, of course, they will not send their troops to Russia. They will not send any weapons to Russia. But in diplomatically, we can see that they are condemning the U.S. unilateral sanctions against Russia, and they are saying that in this U.S. has its own role in this war. But I think that China have good opportunity to stand mediator. Why? Because there is only one power, only one country which has something to say to Russia, and it is China because of their relations. So Putin can listen, see, because they're friendship, because they're good relation, and Ukraine also can accept China's role because in Belt and Road Initiative, these two countries, Russia and China, are playing their own role. One corridor is going from Russia to Europe, and the other one from Central Asia, South Caucasus, Black Sea, Ukraine to Europe. So both sides are connected with China economically, and China is interested in limited confrontation because now the US needs to throw its power to Ukrainian side, to European side, and deter Russia. So China here in Asia Pacific, it is getting some kind of opportunity for maneuvering and for pressing Taiwan. But China is not interested in total war because China is business country. It is making business. It is economic superpower. So it needs peace for selling its products, for keeping open the railroads and roads.
And Dr. Mher, let me ask you about the sanctions, which are incredibly tough sanctions that have come on Russia at the moment. First of all, from the Russian perspective and from the people you've been talking to and what you know, are these sanctions starting to hurt? And do you think the average Russian is going to say, you know, these sanctions are because of this war, or are they going to blame Putin, or are they going to blame the West?
What you have mentioned all are true. So yes, these sanctions are unprecedented, and I can mention that it is hurting Russian economy, politics, military production, everything. And of course, Russian population also will see the impact of these sanctions. But of course, it is politics and economics. But Western powers also must take into consideration, yes, maybe they want to hurt Mr. Putin or oligarchs of Russia, but these sanctions are mostly hurting average people, not them, because they have their money, they have their everything. But what about people? So sanctions must be implemented in a way that average people do not suffer from this. But now people are suffering. Politicians or oligarchs, they are not suffering. They have their money, they have their opportunities in this world. And the other thing, what is happening also, sanctions are sanctions. But we can mention that Russophobia also going on. There are some universities which are pressing Russian students, which is not so good, which is not good. Some Russian artists see this problem as well. So I think that we need to do our best that we do not have not Russophobia nor Ukrainophobia.
And one more question on sanctions. What do you think China will do? Will China help Russia to evade these sanctions, or will China go along with the West and the US, the other countries that are imposing these sanctions?
Before these sanctions, Russian President Vladimir Putin was in Beijing, and they made some agreements about economic cooperation, and China agreed to buy more Russian gas, as China also wants to solve its problem with pollution, which is coming because they are using mostly coal. So they need this gas, Russian gas. So of course they will try to help Russia economically, but they do not lose and they keep their stability, because as I have mentioned, Chinese people do believe that if Russia loses this war, The next one will be China.
Interesting. Stay with us where you are. I see in the screen now we've got Karun with us. I see from behind him, he appears to be at the Maidan. I see that statue behind him, which I recognize. I was in Kiev myself. I was in Kiev in 2018 doing some talks and going around and visiting. Karun, welcome. Welcome to the FCC Hello. Zoom. How are you?
Oh, sorry, I came in a little bit late. There was a sudden concert played by the Tchaikovsky Institute of Kiev just now, and the leader of the concert agreed to talk to me for a few messages to Hong Kong. So I'm sorry for my lateness. Just managed to join in now.
No worries. Thank you very much for coming. What were the messages to Hong Kong? Did he have something to say to people in Hong Kong? We have a lot of people in our Zoom now.
He is saying that peace is the most valuable thing that the world has been enjoying for the past, a lot of years since the World War II ended, and he doesn't want it to happen again. And this is the message he is bringing to a lot of people.
Well, describe what's going on now. You went to a concert. We hear that there's shelling and bombing and missiles coming into Kyiv, but you're going to a concert. So tell us what the situation is really like there on the ground now today.
Yes, right here at least for the last 2 weeks, the central Kiev haven't been having a lot of direct impact, apart from occasions such as TV tower that caused 5 casualties. But for the large parts, central Kiev is peaceful. And today, people actually came together in the Maidan Square. There were about 100 people and about 20 musicians who managed to stay in Kiev without leaving. And they did a concert by Ukrainian artists.
Interesting. Well, so tell us, because we're here, we don't really have a good sense of what's happening there. I mean, what is the city like? Can you go to an ATM machine and get money out? Can you go to a grocery store and get food? I mean, is daily life going on as normal, or is it not normal?
As far as central Kiev is concerned, because the route to the west of the country is still open, and train service to Lviv and also Poland are still open, so groceries are not a big problem. So our electricity and water and internet, they're all working fine. But if you step out of central Kiev into the Kiev Oblast, in cities like Irpin, Bucha, and for example, Warsaw, these are places that are very hardly impacted by the Russian invasion. People lying dead on the streets, cars are being abandoned on broken bridges, and old people and disabled people have to cross the river by walking across the river to get to safety. And this is happening every day. There is a peace corridor for them to leave every day until 4 o'clock. But after 4 o'clock, usually the bombing immediately starts, and was there yesterday.
Now, what was that like yesterday when you were there?
There were basically a lot of elderly people and dogs and abandoned cats and children. And the weak, they are trying to leave the city because they have to make use of the peace window to leave the city, or there's a good chance they get shot.
Wow. Karun, what is the mood among people you talk to, the average Ukrainians there in the city? I mean, are they scared? Are they resilient? What do they say?
I have to say they are, given the circumstances, they are overwhelmingly cheerful. People are so cheerful that I sometimes forget that I'm actually in a war zone, because according to a lot of people that this war has already started since 8 years ago. So this is actually not too new of a thing to them. And they are more resistant to this kind of emotions compared to, for example, people in other places in the world, I think.
And tell us a little bit about your personal situation there now. You're a freelance photographer. You're from Hong Kong. Your stuff, a lot of people have seen your stuff. You're on social media. I mean, are you safe? What is your personal circumstance?
So I am personally safe because I mostly work from central Kiev, which is not being shelled at all right now. 2 days ago, I had a situation. I was trying to go to a war-torn area, European. I went in from the south, and I actually got to a Russian checkpoint, because at the last Ukrainian checkpoint, they said the next checkpoint will still be Ukrainian. But when I got to the checkpoint, it's turned Russian. So I had my encounter with Russian soldiers there, which was actually quite scary, because they had total control of my life at the moment. And
Wow.
fortunately, they were quite chilled, and they let us go. There were like 4 British journalists together with me.
So you showed them what, your passport, and they talked to, how long were you there? What was that like?
Yeah, I had a British passport, so to them it's like 4 British journalists, and they called the commander saying like, we have 4 британских journalists here, and then what do you want to do, commander? And then we're like staying there for 3 minutes waiting for the commander's reply, and then we're so relieved when the commander said let them go.
Wow, wow. Were you scared?
Yes, we put all our hands on the air. I didn't even dare to take out the camera, because that would be a direct ticket to heaven.
Wow. We'll get back to you in just a second. Karu, please hang on with us for a second. I want to go back to Dr. Mher for a second. Dr. Mher, Dr. Mher, what do you? There were Chinese citizens there, I know, in Kyiv, and I know some of them stayed there. The government didn't tell them to evacuate. I mean, what can you say about how China has dealt with this issue? I mean,
yes, it was a great problem, not only with Chinese students, but also Indian students and other foreign students. So this question still exists if we are speaking about these students, foreign students. And Ukrainian side is trying to evacuate them from Poland, and the Russian side is also doing its best to evacuate these people. But of course, China also is using its diplomatic ties to get back its students and people from Ukraine. But they did a lot of work on this direction. But as I know, there are still some Chinese citizens and students in Ukraine.
I see. So China did not expect this to be happening. They did not expect the war. They didn't move their people out ahead of time. Is that correct?
I think that I don't know. Have they got any information from their Russian counterpart about possible military operation in Ukraine on time? But as I know, thousands of Chinese people are doing business in Ukraine, because Ukraine is located in very important crossroad, which is connected, let's say, Asia with Europe. It is playing this role for Russia, of course, for Black Sea and South Caucasus, and many Chinese people were working there. They had their production there. They were doing transportation business, which was connecting this China, Central Asia, Western Asia corridor link from Black Sea for Ukraine and Europe. So, of course, Chinese government could not inform everyone that they go away from Ukraine. And maybe even if they said these people, who would believe that in 21st century, we will have such a war in the center of Ukraine. I was thinking that maybe there will be military operation in Eastern Ukraine, because as you know, 8 years, there is air war with shellings, bombing, with everything. But total war in Ukraine, in Kiev, I think that many experts and politicians were believing on this in 21st century.
Karu, you're nodding your head there. You agree with that? Nobody expected this?
I totally agree. Given the situation, I have been interviewing people since the 18th, which was about 5 days before the start of the war. And literally no one expected a direct hit on Kiev on the very first day. No one ever did. And even the day before the invasion happened, people were still dancing on the street. They were still going to bars. And ask any person, no one ever thought that a attack will be launched on Kiev itself.
And correct me if I'm wrong. You're at Maidan. I can tell from behind you because I was there just a couple of years ago, speaking. The president's office, the President Zelensky's presidential office, is not too far from you. Is that correct?
Yeah. Zelensky's office will be behind this white building and about 5 down. It is a very fortified area, and anyone holding a camera anywhere near it will be stopped.
Okay. So, all right. Well, if you get stopped at any moment, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Be safe. But is President Zelensky, is he there? Is he President Zelensky in there?
I could, however, show you that the Maidan Square is right now blocked off by a lot of barricades, which are designed to stop the Russian invasion if that is going to press all the way to this part of Ukraine.
Let's see those barricades. Oh, I see. Okay, that's the anti-tank, anti-APC, anti-tank barricades there. I see lined up.
Hedgehogs designed to stop tanks from rolling right.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, is President Zelensky there behind you, or is he hiding somewhere in a underground or in a bunker, or do we know?
Zelensky is actually quite a brave person, I have to say. That he sometimes comes out to the streets and do a few selfies and go back in. So there's actually a good chance of bumping into Zelensky on the streets. Given where I live, I live right next to his flat.
Oh, really? Okay. Wow. So you're right there on the streets. All right, it's pretty amazing. Now, I'm just looking behind you, Karu, and it looks like there's not a lot of traffic. There's not a lot of people around. Are people kind of staying indoors, or what's going on there?
Nobody has a real number, but I would say like at least half of Kiev is already out of the city to the west for relative safety.
I see. Yeah, because when I was there a few years ago, 2018, it was a pretty bustling, happening capital. People were going to the opera, they were going to Italian restaurants. The old city there was crowded. There were quite a few tourists around, but now about half the people are gone.
It is a very, very international city, and no one would expect such an international city to get an attack like this. This is very surreal.
Wow. And I want to stay with you just for a second, Karu, because how did you end up there? You're a Hong Kong photojournalist. You were in Belarus before, is that correct? Or
yeah.
Tell us your journey. How did you end up there?
I joined journalism during 2019. I was a scientist before that. I joined journalism in 2019 because I wanted to do something for my hometown. And it was 2020 by the time I realized that there are also places that are having similar situations, like back home, such as Belarus, with their re-election of President Lukashenko. There were pretty bloody crashes on the streets, and I decided to go there and share the stories. And this is when I first got into Eastern Europe. And then the Belarusian protest ended in white terror, and a lot of people are now in Kiev. So these people told me about the stories here, and I got really interested. And I now live in London, and Kiev is like 3 hours flight away, so I decided to come.
Wow, you're a brave guy. By the way, if any of you have any questions, anybody listening to this have any questions for either of our panelists, please send that to question. That's QUSTION, question singular at fcchk.org. Question singular at fcchk.org. Let me go back to you, Dr. Mher, for a second here. The West has put on, I think, incredible punishing sanctions beyond what anybody thought they could marshal within a few days, really, if not even a few weeks. I mean, what's the end game? How do you see this ending now? Do you think these sanctions are going to cause President Putin to change his mind, or do you think we're into something different now?
Of course, sanctions will hurt Russian economy, but we need to mention also that it will hurt Western economies as well. For instance, European economies, and now we can see that oil price in the US is going higher and higher. It is because the US is not importing any more Russian oil. And Russia also is imposing sanctions against European organizations, European companies, the US companies. So it will hurt both. It will hurt world economy, I will say. But I don't think that President Putin will change his mind. We have another country, Iran, which was living under sanctions, but it doesn't change its behavior in international relations. So sanctions are working. They are hurting economies, they are hurting average people, but they are not the most important thing in politics. And the country as Russia, which has a lot of energy sources and it has buyer of these energy sources. Now, the most thing which is actually the most important thing, which is Russia selling and making money, it is gas and energy sources. But as we see, European Union still buys Russian gas. And this gas, it is also very important to mention, but this gas is flowing through Ukraine, through a Ukrainian pipeline towards the Europe. So in this, in sum, I can say that these sanctions will not change the mind of Vladimir Putin to stop these military operations in Ukraine, but they will hurt the Russian, European, and world economies.
And Dr. Mher, do you think, what do you, again, going back to China again, do you think China, which signed this no limits agreement with Russia, do you think they're going to help the West put these sanctions on Russia and make them bite? Or do you think they are going to help alleviate the sanctions a little bit by buying more Russian oil and gas, buying more Russian grain? What do you think? What role do you think China is playing in this?
I think China will make good money in this issue. So it will have an opportunity to get cheap Russian sources, which will not be bought by West. And of course, Russia, it is not in Russian interest that EU put sanctions on energy sources of Russia. Maybe China will buy all this portion, but in this case, China will buy cheaper. China will press Russia to sell it cheaper to China. So it is in Russian interest to keep some kind of balance, energy balance between China and Europe. And European Union, as I have mentioned, it is also not going to stop its energy consumptions from Russia, because, for instance, as German Chancellor mentioned, if they stop this cooperation, all cars in Germany will be stopped, and it is not good for economy, I think. So it is better. There is no winner in this war. Everyone is losing. Russia is losing. West is losing. Ukraine is losing. And the most important thing, people losing their lives. So the best thing is to go back to diplomacy and find ways in this situation.
And by the way, if you have a question, please do send it in now to singular question at fccHK.org. And Karu, let me ask you a question. I mean, you're Chinese in Kyiv. Do people notice that you're Chinese? Are they asking any questions about the China issue?
So whenever people ask where I am from, I say I'm from Hong Kong, and they seem to know what's going on in Hong Kong. And oh, sorry, is this? So I use a British passport as well. So to them, I'm just they'll say I'm a British journalist. This is how they treat.
Okay.
Yeah, really grateful about Boris Johnson's weapon loan to Ukraine, and people have been not giving me any trouble so far. And they are also very supportive to what is going on in Hong Kong, and they are very knowledgeable about the situation.
So they're looking at the geopolitical situation. They're saying, well, you're Chinese. Is China supporting, Russia or whatever? They know what's going on.
Yes, of course, they do know what's going on, but I have to say that a lot of Ukrainian people are actually quite friendly with Chinese because they have a lot of business connections here.
Mhm.
So I don't think there's a very big anti-China kind of sentiment right here for now.
Correct. Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, tell me if I'm wrong. You were in Belarus before this. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
What is the role of Belarus in this invasion of Ukraine?
So, in 2020, obviously Lukashenko, well, according to a lot of democratic people from Belarus, they think that Lukashenko stole the vote, and I personally do agree on that. But however, Belarus, well, obviously Tikhanovskaya is right now in Vilnius in exile, and Lukashenko is holding all of the power in Belarus, and also they have a huge loan from Russia. It's like a $1 billion loan issued in 2020, and they also are very dependent on Russian oil for secondary manufacturing. Belarus is a country with very, very little natural resources, so I don't think Lukashenko has a lot of say right now on what Russia wants to use their territories or their armies to do. And a lot of dissidents from Belarus are living in Kiev. They're living in Kiev, they're living in Warsaw, and a lot of them are living in Vilnius. And the people I know who are from Belarus, they're actually joining local battalions to fight the Russian invasion. And if it's necessary, they will fight their own people.
Mm-hmm. And Karu, just stay with me for a second here, because I'm just looking behind you. I'm seeing kind of built, beautiful European, maybe Stalinist style buildings. I don't see any kind of damage from any kind of missiles or any rocket strikes or anything. So you're in just to tell people where you are and where they're watching these scenes of fighting, which must be on the outskirts of where you are, correct?
So this place is called the Maidan Nezalezhnosti, which means the Plaza of Independence. Maidan refers to the angel that is sitting on the top of this pillar here. This little lady on top of the pillar is the maiden, and this Maidan refers to her. And this is very central part of Kiev. Back here we see the Union Building, which was the headquarters for during the Maidan Revolution. A lot of protesters used this building for refuge, and it was actually burnt down by government forces under Yanukovych in 2014, and several journalists and doctors and patients died here. Well, they have won the revolution, and this building now is the Maidan Museum in memory of the revolution. And they actually have a lot of memorial places here in Kiev to commemorate that event in history. Okay,
that's the 2014 Maidan Revolution, right?
Yes, and which probably also started the Russian aggression towards Ukraine, because right after the Maidan Revolution succeeded, Russia decided to invade Crimea and also subsequently Donbass and Luhansk by local insurgents. So it's a very interesting story. So Ukraine won the revolution, but does it mean a peaceful country? And for now, the answer is no.
Interesting. That actually, let me switch to a couple of questions from the audience. Again, if you have questions, please do send them in right now. Still time. Question singular at fcchk.org. Question from Mike Rouse. Dr. Mher, I'll ask you. The question is, nowhere in the Western media or in comments by Western governments do I see much or indeed any reference to Russia's repeated opposition to the eastern expansion of NATO. How do you view, or how do you both view this Russian opposition to the eastern expansion of NATO? In other words, did the Russians have some point when they say they were concerned about this eastern expansion of NATO expanding beyond its traditional borders? Dr. Mher?
Yes, thank you. Of course, the problem is that NATO was created for struggling against Soviet Union. And so now we have not Soviet Union. But NATO is still continue to go towards East. So if there is no enemy, if there is no another power, why NATO is going towards East? It is the question which Russians are arising. And they see that NATO is going towards East because NATO is trying to go near to Russian borders. And NATO is creating some kind of military links with this country. And it is imposing its military missiles and systems which can hurt Russians. So Russia, of course, see security issue in these questions. And there is and Russians think that NATO made some kind of agreement with Western states, made some kind of agreement with Gorbachev, last president of the USSR, and they promised Soviet Union and Russians that NATO will not go towards Russia, will not involve in its system any new country from the eastern part. But as we see, NATO continues its expansion towards east, and of course, Russians see some kind of problem. I want to go back also what said our colleague Kaoru about the Maidan revolution. Why did it happen? Because at that time Russia was going to create a Russian economic union, and the US saw some kind of problem. They saw that Russia wants to rehabilitate ex-Soviet Union, and Ukraine was the second biggest and was the second strongest country in Soviet Union, and they were thinking if they take from this Eurasian economic union Ukraine, it will not have such potential in the future. So for this reason, Russians think that for this reason, the US organized Maidan revolution in Ukraine, that they took Ukraine from them. And there were also another problem as well, Crimea. Why did Russia went to Crimea? Because they thought that if Ukraine go to the Western camp, so NATO will have an opportunity to have military bases in Crimea. If you look at the map of the Black Sea, you can see that Crimea has something very strong position in the middle of Black Sea. And who will have Crimea in Black Sea? It will have something upper hand against others. So Russians spoke that if they were losing Ukraine and Crimea, they will lose their place in Black Sea as well. So the problem is very complex, and the problem is not only about Russia, it is also about the West, about geopolitical colliding interests in Eurasia.
And Dr. Mher, let me keep you there for 1 second. Another question coming in from FCC member Alejandro Reyes, who is asking, what is your assessment of the international support that Russia can count on? 5 countries supported Russia in the UN General Assembly, 35 abstained in the vote, including China, India, Vietnam, South Africa, Pakistan, and Armenia. What do you sense from the way that's going? And specifically, given where you are, why did Armenia abstain?
Actually, Russia is not alone. It has its 2 organizations. One is the economic one and political one as well. The Russian Economic Union, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan are members. And it has also its military alignment, Collective Security Treaty Organization, with Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Belarus. So Russia has its own allies and many links with different countries in Latin America as well, and in Asia as well. So in this situation, many countries see that Ukrainian crisis was not started today or yesterday. It started 8 years ago when West started to make some kind of movements there for organizing revolution. And for this reason, in UN, of course, in UN Assembly, Russian allies and its partners will try to help, or at least to not do anything against Russia.
Okay. And Karu, a question for you, also from Alejandro Reyes from AsiaGlobal Institute. He's asking, are you able to get a sense of the foreign fighters who may have come into Ukraine to help with the resistance?
I've heard, actually, I have met a battalion of foreign people residing in Ukraine. One of them is actually Russian, and there were also Spanish Ukrainian, Portuguese Ukrainian, and a few Brazilian Ukrainian. They were all in one battalion, and they were hiding in the forest. I just passed by them, and they spoke to us in English, which is a very rare thing. And there are foreign battalions fighting right now in Ukraine. And I do personally know a team of Hong Kong fighters might be coming in, and I'm trying to get a contact for a possible interview.
Really?
Just a warning here that is that I might be going out of battery, so I'm sorry if I cut off.
If you cut off, that we'll thank you. But before you cut off, Melissa from FCC is asking, it strikes me that Ukrainians are taking up arms to protect their country, just like the Polish during the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. Have you seen people there in where you are taking up arms, doing anything? What do you see?
Well, yes, I mean, you have seen the checkpoint just now, and all these checkpoints, they have like thousands of them on every major roads, and not even major roads as well. They are all manned, and they don't have that much army, so a lot of the men are actually militia people who have picked up arms, and they are joining local self-defense units in case. And also they are helping safeguard important facilities, such as the TV tower. The guy who showed me around the TV tower was actually a civil engineer and picked up arms and started his duty there.
Okay.
A lot of Belarusian people are joining those ones too.
Okay. And by the way, Melissa who asked the question says, please stay safe. She wants you to stay safe. And one more for you. I know your battery may go out, so I'm going to ask you the next one from Joseph Lau. He's just saying so much of the so much media has been reported from the Russians saying that there have been neo-Nazis and extremists who have infiltrated. Have you, Karu, have you seen any elements of these, what they're talking about?
Actually not, because even I've been explicitly asking if people dislike Russian, but the majority of answers is that they have so many Russian friends and they have no problem of people speaking Russian. My colleagues, a lot of colleagues who work here, they speak regularly, they speak Russian to Ukrainian people because it's very rare for a Western person to know Ukrainian, but they don't seem to bump into any major problems. Well, there is paranoia against Russian people since the war started, and I think that is reasonable. And also, yesterday I went to the checkpoint where a lot of the refugees are coming out of Irpin, and I had a local fixer and an old lady who is badly hurt in her leg, told me that the Russian troops actually went into all of the houses to search for symbols of the swastika and symbols like that, and maybe a possible connect that what Kremlin wants to portray Ukraine.
Okay. And I know your battery may be running out soon, so I'm going to pepper you with a couple quick questions, and then we'll go back to Dr. Mher. But first of all, your own personal safety. Can you get out when you need to? What's your situation?
Yes, right now we can. The trains to the west are still running. Some of them go directly to Warsaw. I heard the border is kind of have long queues, but there's no problem getting in and getting out. Unless you're a Ukrainian male, you can't get out. But for me, I can.
So you could you'll go to the train station and just get on a train and you're able to go out. Is that correct?
Yeah. Unless they decided to bomb the train lines to stop Western people coming in, then maybe there will be a little problem. But let's hope the Russian will be nice to foreign journalists.
but you're a brave guy. And one more question from you. I mean, you're there as a freelance photographer. Have you taken any training or any hostile environment? Do you have protective gear? Do you have a helmet? Do you have a flak jacket?
I have a level 4 protective gear, which can, in theory, stop 10 AK-47 rounds. We have a group of very experienced war journalists right here in Kiev, and I'm just learning from these guys. I mean, I do have a lot of experiences taking pictures of protests in Hong Kong, in Belarus, in Mexico, but this is my first war, so I'm being really careful here.
Well, continue to be careful and stay safe, my friend, and try to stay with us if you can. If we lose you on the battery, I understand. Dr. Mher, I'll go back to you again. Again, a question from from Mr. Joseph Lau, who's saying that so much of the Western media is demonizing Russia, but independent media have been talking about this question of neo-Nazis in the Ukrainian military and others. Putin has mentioned this again. I mean, do you have any evidence if this is true, or what do you think about this accusation?
Maybe in this, it will be right if Kaoru answers to this question, because he's in the field and maybe he knows better what is happening in the field. But there is another thing which China's foreign ministry also raised days ago, about biological laboratories which are in Ukraine, and they are financed by the US. So Russia and China now raising this question as well, because due to them, I don't know, is it true or not, due to them, there were some kind of biological weapons they were trying to produce, and US also approved that these biological laboratories belongs to him. Maybe time will show what were they doing in these laboratories. I don't want to take any part. I just want to
neurological
introduce two viewpoints. And going back to the voting of the Armenia, I think that I didn't answer to this question. Actually, Armenia had, of course, Armenia is a Russian military ally, but on the other hand, we have also very good relations with Ukraine and Ukrainian people. Thousands of Armenians are living in Ukraine, and we have Ukrainian minority in Armenia as well. And we have special relations also with Russia. So it is better that Armenia do not choose any side and work for peace.
Okay, Karu, did you have something to say there?
Oh yeah, I was just wondering how a neurological weapon could possibly work, because I'm originally from biological sciences, and I was just genuinely curious on like how a neurological agents can be like delivered to like indiscriminately a lot of people and causing a certain behavioral changes. So well, it's just like a scientific question I had in mind when I heard about.
Interesting. Do you know that? Do you happen to know the answer to that, Doctor?
It sounds slightly conspiracy, because I don't think science is advanced that much. As to my knowledge of biological science. But sure. I guess we will see, because both of us don't have any proof on that.
Sure. Yeah. And while we still have you there, Karu, before your phone battery goes out, a question from Claudia. Good question. She says, "What's your biggest challenge working there now?"
The biggest challenge is actually trying to take picture of things. The real obstacles are the Ukrainian, because it is a security concern to put any information out to the public, and because you never know what information is would be used by the opponents to maybe attack. There's a story about this Ukrainian soldier who posted a picture of him and his mates doing gym at a gymnasium, and 10 minutes later it got bombed.
Wow. Okay.
So there is quite a lot of paranoia going on with cameras. If you hang camera around, they are not happy about it.
Wow.
The more you get out of the central city, it gets better because people are more chilled.
Mhm.
But that is especially of me being a photographer, that is a real challenge.
Okay. And Claudia asked two more questions. One is there something that people don't realize about Ukraine or Ukrainians that you'd like to tell us?
No, that's a good question. Ukrainians are, I think the deepest impression I have with Ukrainians are that they are very resilient and they are they are kind of indifferent to fear. They don't show fear, and they are not very frightened unless they're bombed directly by a bomb. Maybe they get more frightened if that happens. But this is surprisingly, because you see the supermarkets are all full of stocks, and no one is like fighting each other. No babushkas fighting each other for packs of eggs. It were very obviously happening in some supermarkets in Hong Kong. Wartime, none of this is happening, and people are queuing ATM. So this is a very positive experience I have with the Ukrainian people. They're overly friendly as well.
That's fantastic. And one more for you, Karu. Claudia is asking, what do Ukrainians tell you that they want or need right now? What can people do to help?
Most of the people nowadays are saying close the airspace. A lot of people are saying that.
Close the airspace. Okay.
Well, I would agree that it could be a hard thing to do on NATO's behalf. So I personally am not sure if that is the easiest thing to do. But also a lot of military support, or I mean, as in like weapons and stuff, because especially the air is not very well protected right now. So I think they do hope for more of that. That's what they have been saying. But they have in general been very thankful to us, Europe's help on this situation.
And Dr. Mher, what do you see? Where do you see this going? I mean, in sense of you've got the U.S. now saying they're going to cut off Russian oil. The Europeans saying they may be following along. Maybe. What's the end game? How do you see this ending?
I do believe that sides must go back to diplomacy, because this war will not solve the problem. It will create new problem. And this problem will harm world economy and people-to-people contact. So there is no way out. Sanctions are going on, and but they are not helping. I do believe that sides must sit down and speak with each other.
Can I ask one question on that before I cut it? Because I would like to know what would you think will be the actual steps that could potentially de-escalate this situation, because it would be very hard for Putin or the states to back off, or the West to back off. It's very hard for them to just back off, because they need a reason to back off, especially after they avoided the Minsk agreements. I don't see how we could actually de-escalate this situation. I would like to know more about that.
Yeah, de-escalation, Mher?
It is a very hard question, but I will try to answer. Of course, it is not something new, what I am saying. It is neutrality of Ukraine. Maybe it will solve all problems if Ukraine stands neutral country without joining any military bloc, which will be Russian-led or the US-led. We have such experience. Austria, Switzerland, so they are living on their own. And I do believe that this neutrality of Ukraine will be okay for everyone, for Russia, for US, and for Ukraine, because it will be very good for Ukraine. It will have an opportunity to stand something like a bridge between West, Russia, and China. It will make a business, economy will grow, and there will be no war.
Explicitly I asked that question to a lot of Ukrainian people, and they seem to be pretty against the idea of neutrality. They are saying explicitly that they don't want to be Switzerland.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Maybe it's kind of nationalism, maybe.
Okay. We are just out of time. Again, let me just ask one last quick question. We got a minute left. I think we can squeeze another minute in. If people want to understand more about what's going on in Europe or Ukraine or get themselves educated, can you recommend they read anything? Is there something you've been reading that's of interest, or how did Karu, how did you educate yourself before going there?
I read a lot of books. I don't. Well, I read the history of the. I started with the history of the Kievsky Rus, the Kievan Rus, which was started in AD 700 something, but that actually holds the roots and the and how Russia became Russia and how Ukraine became Ukraine. So it's actually quite a long history, and I think this history part is in the very core of Putin's heart, because I think he actually has some personal like romanticism in trying to take Kiev back, because this is the heart of Russian culture, it's the heart of the Rus culture. So if you will really want to understand what he is thinking, I think you actually have to go quite a bit up history.
Okay.
And also since the dissolution of the USSR, the Russian Empire, this is all very important to understand the story here, especially what Putin is thinking, I think.
Thank you. And Dr. Mher, anything you recommend people read, or to distract themselves from all of this? What do you recommend they read?
Thanks, of course, but let me make some comment what Kaoru said about that.
Yep.
Ukrainian people do not want to be neutral country. So they need to know that NATO is not ready to accept Ukraine as its member. It is very important moment, because many Ukrainian politicians, they are making some kind of noise that, Ukraine can be stay NATO member. But NATO leadership, they have mentioned it several times that they do not want and they will not see Ukraine as a member. So if Ukrainian people knows about it, maybe they will do new calculations, and they will maybe it will be good for them to stay natural state. I just want to make some recommendation about changing world order. Last year we prepared book China and Eurasia, which is called Rethinking, Cooperation and Contradiction in the Era of Changing World Order. Here we try to unite scholars from the Austria, China, Russia, Montenegro, Georgia, India, and we try to understand what is happening in the world, how is world order is being changed. So it is the book which was published timely by Routledge. I think that many people can find answers what is happening now. And now I am reading another book as well, which is published just yesterday by Brill Publishing House. It is called Rethinking China, the Middle East and Asia in Multiplex World Order. It is edited by Moshtaba Mahdavi and Tuğrul Keskin. Very interesting book. Who is interested in Asia and Middle East relations, maybe they can have this book.
Can we see the first one? What was the first book again?
Here it is.
Ah, there it is. Okay. It's on the screen, everybody.
Yes.
We'll put that on the FCC website for everybody who wants to understand the situation going on here. And you again, thank you, Karu, thank you, Dr. Mher, Dr. Mher Sahakyan. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Thank you so much for joining us.
Your Armenian is great.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to try to learn it now. Thank you so much for joining us from Armenia. We really appreciate it. Karu, please stay safe. Get out of there when you need to get out of there. Please stay safe. We're all worried about you. We all want you to be safe. So please stay safe.
Man. Thank you very much, Zachary.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you all of us for joining us, whether you're joining us live or watching this all on YouTube. please keep an eye on fcchk.org. We're going to be doing more on Ukraine, more on all kinds of issues coming up. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.